The next one, state provision. Now, that's basically nationalisation. Now, Western capitalist economies, so not places like China, which is a state capitalist economy, Western capitalist economies believe that nationalised industry and provision of all kinds is inefficient and costly. So if it's nationalised, it's inefficient, it's costly. You can hear the mantra on the news regularly, weekly certainly. Private ownership good, public ownership bad. What's it got to do with the EU? Well, both the EU and the UK resist state ownership, state provision of anything. They sell off state provision assets, post office. Instant cash boost to the treasury and then it's gone. Theoretically, they believe it produces increased efficiency in that industry. Is that true? No. Take the deregulation and privatisation of the railways under the Conservative government under John Major. 5 years, 1 month later, the trains started coming off the rails. That means that the men, by the way, who actually had originally regulated and maintained the railways were wrong, because they said it would take 5 years. It actually took 5 years and 1 month. There you go, wrong. And nevertheless, people died 1 month after they estimated that they would die. So much you can't predict the future. And in fact, the result was because the private companies had done no maintenance on the tracks. No maintenance on the tracks. And in order to fix it, the tracks have had to be stripped down to the soil level. Literally everything. Complete relay. Astonishingly expensive. If it had been maintained, it would have cost a lot less. So safety was sacrificed for profit by private industry, and that's exactly why the railways were nationalised in the first place, and why they were regulated in the first place at the end of the 19th and during the 20th century. And the same is true of water, which has been privatised now, and there has been a reservoir closed down because it's not economically viable in this country. Really? Oh, what about the water shortages that we used to have? Oh, and we're going to have them even more. Education currently being privatised. Police, military, not yet. Has it got anything to do with the EU? Not really, no. It's globalism. Shall I call it a belief? What shall I call it? Call it whatever you want. Okay, next one. Regulation. This is the next killer. So we've had a killer already in the flow of money, the euro. We've had a killer earlier on. Let me just go back to it on my computer. And that killer is tariffs and subsidies combined together. But now the real killer is regulation. Now basically this follows directly on from what I've just said. If you have too much regulation, you increase costs. If you have too little regulation, it creates either criminal behaviour, the banks in 2008, or safety issues, the unsafe railways created by the John Major government. Now, how does the EU deal with this? Well, the EU creates 2,500 business effect regulations per year. You get all sorts of silly comments made about this. Boris Johnson talks about 2 or 3 bananas making a bunch. Now, he's making fun, but when people make fun of him for that, they're actually wrong. These are the regulations that are killing the EU economy. Killing it. 2,500 a year. Count it up over 15-20 years and see where it gets you. It gets you a flatlined economy. Think about it. It's madness. You've got 27 different countries and the same regulation in all of them. Okay, that alone, just that, will shipwreck the EU economy. Just that. You don't need all the other stuff I've said. Just that. However, these regulations are also used as a national defensive tool. Now, this is not to do with the EU. An example, the best one, is called local content regulation. So let's say Italy, they want to protect their shoe industry. So they require a 10%, 25%, or say 50% local content rule. So that percentage of the product has to be sourced in Italy. So, okay, so you are a Manchester, UK based shoe manufacturer, so you have to buy 10%, 25% or 50% of your leather or rubber or glue from Italy. You've got to buy it anyway. It just might be more expensive. But just a minute, you've then got to prove that you've done that. Administrative costs, and these are variable costs. It means you cannot buy from the most economic source, and it means you then have to produce a mound of administration to prove to the Italian government that you've actually done what they want you to do so that you can import your goods. Okay, you do that. Why not put a tariff in? Because EU regulation doesn't allow you to. But you see, if Italy put a tariff in, your Manchester shoe manufacturer would just export to Italy and put the tariff on the top. But everywhere else that Manchester shoe manufacturer was selling shoes to would be sold at cost plus profit, right across the world, plus any tariffs that they put on, more competitive. But they can't. Either that or they have to have two production lines. Think about the insanity there. One of which produces the same shoe for Italy, and another of which it's just, come on. Now, is this serious? Yeah, Fiat. Fiat is affected in precisely this way. They're competing with Mercedes, etc. in Germany, and they can't cope. The irony of it is that the owner of Fiat in 1945 was actually on the European Round Table that set up the economy of the European Union. So was the owner of Philips, by the way. So this man, this hugely influential man, helped to create an economic system. A successful businessman helped to create an economic system in Europe that is now putting his company out of business. Now the same is happening across the whole of the EU to the entire steel industry. They're not protecting it. Now regulation has to be nimble and flexible. You see, you can put regulation in January, and by March it's destructive, or it's not enough. So you've got to be able to respond nimbly, flexibly, and those two qualities the EU totally lacks. Okay, the last one, persuasion. This is listed in the textbooks, just in case you want to know. This has just been used to remind me. I've taken no examples from here, by the way. Old-fashioned, bit out of date, but it gave me the list of 8, and I added tariffs because tariffs are listed in a separate place. That's what I used it for. But any economics textbook like that will take you through this with no problem at all. There's no need for me to type this up. Go and get one from a second-hand bookshop or occasionally from a charity shop, and you just skim through it. Just take a look at government controls and work it out for yourself. You don't have to believe me.